upon which our congregations in Woodbury and Meriden make their home was not empty wilderness when Europeans first arrived in Connecticut. We begin each of our services acknowledging this fact as a step on the road to justice. There are 5 recognized indigenous tribal nations in Connecticut: the Mashantucket Pequot, the Mohegan, the Eastern Pequot, the Golden Hill Pawcatucket, and the Shagatoke. The Mattatuck Unitarian Universalist Society and the U Church in Meriden acknowledge that our congregations occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of these nations. In offering this land acknowledgement, we commit to learning more about these hosts and neighbors, and we affirm indigenous sovereignty, history, and experience.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. voice of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Welcome, everyone, and happy spring to the Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society and the Unitarian Universalist Church of Meriden. I am Lynne Grobsky, Minister Intern at the Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society, and I will be your worship leader for this service. Today, on the second day of spring, we continue with this month's theme of commitment. Today, we explore the ecological crisis, its causes, consequences, and what can be done to save our Mother Earth. How can we commit to saving our Mother Earth? And now we light the symbol of our faith, the flaming chalice.
The spring equinox is the representation of new life and light, new beginnings, paths, and seeds. Pagans honor the vernal equinox in a celebration known as Ostara, named after the goddess whose name roughly translates to moving in the direction of the rising sun. This is a season centered on renewal. Now is a time of celebrating the freshness of life and of taking the time to regenerate abundance and manifest our dreams. Nature is waking up and being reborn. This is the season of illumination, a time to focus on what you want to see grow in your life and what you want to harvest. Your spirit is coming alive with hopeful energy. Which seeds are you going to plant in the ground to tend and harvest? I light our chalice to the words of Langston Hughes. In time of silver rain, the earth puts forth new life again. Green grasses grow and flowers lift their heads, and over all the plain the wonder spreads of life, of life, of life. In time of silver rain, the butterflies lift silken wings to catch a rainbow cry, and trees put forth new leaves to sing in joy beneath the sky, when spring and life are new.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice fueled by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
One day, a man was walking along the beach when he noticed a boy picking up starfish and throwing them into the ocean. Approaching the boy, he asked, "Excuse me, but what are you doing?" The boy replied, "Throwing starfish back into the ocean. The sun is rising and the tide is going out. If I don't throw them back, they'll die." The man laughed to himself and said, "But there's too many starfish on this beach. You can't possibly make a difference." After listening politely, the boy bent down, picked up another starfish, and threw it into the ocean. Then turning to the man, he said, "I made a difference to that one."
Hello, my name is Michael Lang. I am a member of MUUS and co-chair of the Green Sanctuary Committee, which is part of our Social Justice Committee. This being the spring equinox, I wanted to share my experiences that have led me to become an advocate for the earth and how that activism has found a home in the work of Green Sanctuary here at MUUS. I guess many of us came to UU in the first place because of our concern for both social justice and the natural environment. I know that was a large part of my motivation. My journey to awareness of social and environmental justice was comprised of many paths. I did not grow up in a socially activist family. My awakenings began during the civil rights and anti-war movements of the 1960s, but began in earnest when I joined the Peace Corps. I was part of an ambitious urban community development project in the barriadas, or slums, of Panama City. It was there that I came face to face with real poverty and deprivation. Later, I worked in San Miguelito, a planned community for former slum dwellers. A central institution there was the new Catholic Church, served by priests from Chicago, who were followers of Bishop Marcos McGrath, tenets of liberation theology that focused on the needs of the poor. The church community created a beautiful folk mass that celebrated the dignity and rights of the poor to a better life on earth. The church rejected the traditional Catholic teachings in Latin America that stigmatized the poor as humble people told to be quiet and patiently await their reward in an afterlife. Later, inspired by the positive images of life in San Miguelito, I did graduate work in urban and regional planning at the London School of Economics. I learned about British urban planning, which is quite different from that of the USA, where private property rights are sacrosanct and loosely controlled urban sprawl typifies our pattern of land use development and degrades our natural environment. In Britain, on the other hand, planning laws are instrumental in strengthening and containing central cities with green belts, preventing suburban sprawl, protecting open spaces and the natural environment. We can certainly learn something here. Like so many Americans, I found myself planted where I could find a job. For me, it was Rutgers University in Camden, New Jersey. so Philadelphia and southern New Jersey became home base for many decades. Fortunately, I became a professor of urban studies and community development, where I focused on the environmental aspects of the built environment. Camden, like Waterbury, is a post-industrial city struggling with a host of problems. There was much to do. Also formative for me was the influence of my 3 daughters and their involvement in various environmental causes, such as animal rights and becoming proselytizing vegetarians. My wife, Collie, has been an unstoppable force for social energy and the greening of life. I am truly in their debt. Attending Germantown Unitarian Society in Philadelphia was another important influence. Germantown is a stable, diverse, progressive community, and the society, in reflecting this diversity, has a strong focus on social justice and inclusion. In addition, Germantown is a historic neighborhood with a mix of architectural styles set in a leafy green environment. All of this has long attracted many progressive environmentalists. To take but one example, a powerful influence in the neighborhood was the dynamic social activist Maggie Kuhn, founder and leader of the Gray Panthers, which she founded after being forced to retire at age 65. Maggie said, "Old people and women constitute America's biggest untapped and undervalued human energy source." She's also famous for saying, "Don't be afraid to speak truth to power, even if your voice shakes." She advocated for a number of social justice causes, including better and more creative housing for seniors. Maggie lived in Germantown in a large group home with young and old living together in a mutually supportive commune. Maggie generously opened her home to the UU religious education classes and gave an inspiring talk to the children. One could not help but be positively influenced by this rich, nurturing, and inclusive environment. So Philly was home for many years, but we were fortunate to have a second family base. First South Kent, and later Woodbury, was where my parents had a summer cottage and where we spent many weekends and summer vacations stretching back to the late 1950s. Heck, I remember the flood of 1955 and the terrible devastation that resulted. Now, I guess you're thinking, gosh, Mike, that's being an old-timer, all right. So Woodbury has been part of my life for many years. And it was after moving here full-time several years ago, at a MUUS coffee hour, that Bob Friedlander, learning something of my background, first told me about Green Sanctuary and its program at the UUA. Checking the Green Sanctuary website, I was impressed with the comprehensive nature of the program, which began in 1989. My key takeaway from reading the web page was that environmental justice aspects of climate change are at the top of the list. So engaging with underserved communities and those communities that have been historically discriminated against must be part of the effort. Engaging means direct involvement with new or existing environmental justice projects. Right up my alley, I thought. So several of us put out a call to join our nascent Green Sanctuary Committee, and fired up with enthusiasm, MUUSers flocked to join. Well, about 10 souls, more or less, enough to get started anyway. So what have we accomplished so far? Well, for the past 2 years, we have hosted a successful series of stimulating talks on climate change under the banner of the Greater Woodbury Environmental Forum, funded by the Kinetic Community Foundation. We have worked with officials in the town of Woodbury to pursue policies that would advance its standing under the statewide Sustainable Connecticut program, which gives awards to towns that pursue good environmental practices. We have tended the MUUS Garden at Flanders Nature Center with food donated to the Woodbury Food Bank. We have encouraged Woodbury to work with the PACE program in order to conduct energy audits of the town. Members of Green Sanctuary Committee have worked with local community organizations in Waterbury and Naugatuck to research former industrial sites, now termed brownfield sites, due to their legacy of pollution, and met with state officials and the mayor of Naugatuck advocating for remedial action to address this issue. Members of our committee have developed outreach that led to membership or participation in community organizations that are working for environmental justice and climate change, such as the Naugatuck Valley Project, the Intervalley Project, and the Environmental Council of Naugatuck. Members of our committee have helped to staff the Earth Day booth on Woodbury's Earth Day. We have established a strong relationship with the Waterbury Neighborhood Housing Services, which develops affordable housing opportunities, and the Crown Brook Association to support their community garden on Burton Street in Waterbury. Our latest initiatives involve partnering with these groups and the Audubon Society to establish pop-up Audubon centers in Waterbury parks and a tree planting program for Waterbury and Naugatuck. Stay tuned for updates. And last, but far from least, has been our heroic effort to apply for formal recognition from UUA as a Green Sanctuary congregation. This is a long and detailed application that involves many moving parts, not least of which involves informing our congregation of our efforts and soliciting a buy-in to the whole concept, part of our ongoing outreach efforts. All this activity fits in with UU's 7th principle of respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part, and passing along this ethos. In so doing, we follow in the wake of those many sages and seers who extolled all peoples, to honor the earth and all living things, and to work to undo the impact of years of environmental injustice that have disproportionately affected the poor. People like Rachel Carson, Aldo Leopold, Robert Bullard, David Brower, Barbara Kingsolver, and so many others. In particular, the many indigenous leaders here and elsewhere who have always cautioned us against rampant consumerism, the military-industrial complex, and their inevitable pollution and devastation. So I end with a call to you to join the Green Sanctuary Committee and participate in one of our projects and see what we can do together to help Mother Earth this spring. Thank you.
May I ever use my hands for lifting up. May I ever use my voice for speaking truth. May I consecrate each day and live with joy and wonder. May I sow in peace as all the wild things do. I will ever use my voice for lifting up. This voice was made for peace. I will ever use my eyes for seeking truth. These eyes were made for truth. I will consecrate each day and love with joy and wonder. I will sow in peace as all the wild things do. There is peace on I will reap in peace as all the wild things do. Wild and precious, we are wild and precious. Life is wild and precious.
I am an avid hiker. It is an important spiritual practice for me to get a forest bath 6 or 7 days a week. Monday through Friday, I hike with my best girlfriend at Tyler Mill Preserve in Wallingford, about 8 minutes from my house. Today, Tyler Mill has a total of 14 miles of trails. The Muddy River flows through Tyler Mill and is a conservation area. The Muddy River is 2 miles long and has 5 major tributaries. Its natural resources include the Muddy River Stream Corridor and related tributaries, Tamarack Swamp, Red Maple Swamp, a trap rock ridgeline, wet meadows, grass meadows, and hardwood forest. Tyler Mill in the early 1700s was settled by a group of farmers. The land was deforested for crops and pastures. In 1905, farming declined and trees started to grow again. There are many stone walls there to this day that were the boundaries for the farms. There was a microburst in 2018 that caused considerable damage to trees and foliage. Invasive plants such as garlic mustard are present. White ash trees are succumbing to the emerald ash borer. Black oaks suffer from gypsy moth larvae. Red cedar trees that were planted by the farmers are now skeletonized. These issues are, I feel, a result of human expansionism. The human supremacist view that nature is to be controlled and harnessed for man's profit has far-reaching effects on all ecosystems. St. Francis of Assisi reminds us that our blue boat home is like a sister with whom we share life and a mother who provides for all our wants and needs. He writes, and I quote, "Praise be to you, my Lord, through our sister, Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us, and who produces various fruit with colored flowers and herbs. St. Francis embodies the practice of integral ecology, caring for the Mother Earth, the poor, and the marginalized. He illustrates the interconnectedness of nature, justice for those in poverty, peace, and commitment to the common good, which is integral ecology. This sister of ours is crying out in pain. I believe the pandemic is a symptom of ecological deterioration brought on by human exploitation. Another example of ecological deterioration is the fact that there are 9 million people living within 2 miles of hazardous waste sites in this country. Over half of them are people of color. American culture's use of the earth is deeply connected to the underlying foundation of white supremacy. There is a speeding up of changes that affect humanity on many levels. This is due, at least in part, by the increasingly intensified pace of life. Change is constant and a large part of the human experience. However, when it harms the earth, the quality of life for all beings is adversely affected. Exposure to pollution from hundreds of millions of tons of waste, which is highly toxic and radioactive, is the cause of many diseases. This pollution is a direct consequence of our throwaway culture. The climate is what is shared by all living beings on the earth. Climate change and global warming is thus a worldwide problem with far-reaching implications in all areas of life, and it's one of the prime issues facing humanity today. Many impoverished people live in areas heavily affected by climate change, who depend on agriculture, forestry, and fishing to survive. They don't have the ability to adapt to climate change. There has been a tragic increase in the number of immigrants being forced to flee their homes because of environmental degradation. Another major problem is the scarcity of fresh drinking water. Water poverty is rampant in many places in the world, especially Africa, where many cities and rural areas experience droughts, which greatly affect farming. 60 million people die of hunger every year. The quality of water worldwide is in constant decline. In some places, water is a commodity bought and sold. This goes against the basic human right of having clean water. It is needed for our very survival. In places where there is more than enough water, it is being wasted. Greater scarcity of water will add to increased cost of food and related food products. Studies have been done that say that there is a danger of an acute water shortage within the next few decades unless action is taken. The last problem I will mention, although the list goes on, is the loss of biodiversity. Global resources are being depleted through irresponsible exploitation for industry. Thousands of plant and animal species become extinct because of what humanity is doing to the planet. This harms the ability of ecosystems to function and stay in balance. Gandhi wrote, "The earth is sufficient for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed." Barbara Kimmerer is a Native American nature writer who belongs to the Potawatomi tribe. The native language of the Potawatomi, she says, was washed, and I quote, was washed from the mouths of children in Italian boarding schools where speaking your native language was forbidden, end quote. Her grandfather was 9 years old when he was taken from his family. She attends the yearly tribal gatherings, even though she lives far from the reservation. A few years ago, while at the tribal gathering, she attended a language class in their native language. She writes, and I quote, "Every single fluent speaker in our tribe would be there as teachers," end quote. When the teachers were called to come up, they moved slowly with canes, walkers, and wheelchairs, 9 in all. Kimmerer took it upon herself to learn her native language in an attempt to keep it alive. She had sticky notes all over her house. It was hard for her to learn. The English language is based on nouns. We are a materialistic culture after all. Only 30% of English words are verbs, but the Potawatomi language is composed of 70% verbs, which all have to be conjugated with different tenses and cases to learn. She almost gave up several times. Then she had an epiphany. Suddenly, she could feel the words bring nature to life. An example of this vibrant language is that there is no word for please in Potawatomi because food, and I quote, "Food was meant to be shared. No added politenesses were needed. It was simply a cultural given that when one was asking respectfully, The missionaries took this absence as further evidence of crude manners," end quote. In the Potawatomi language, everything is alive. The word for bay, for example, means to be a bay, a verb. She writes that a bay is a noun only if water is dead. The language reflects life in the world, life that is in all of nature. The English language, on the other hand, promotes exploitation by naming life in nature as things. We call a tree or a squirrel it, which serves to reduce life to something to be subjugated. By using the pronouns he and she for all of nature, imbues us with more respect for Mother Earth. And I would like to tell you a story.
Long ago, there was a turtle who lived in a wonderful pond. The pond had lots of fish, it had a grassy bank, and it had alder trees. So Turtle would spend his days fishing for his meals, sunning himself on the grassy bank, and taking shade under the alder trees and taking a nap. Well, one day, Turtle felt the cold winds coming down from the north, so he knew it was time for him to hibernate. So he swam to the bottom of the pond, buried himself under the mud, and slept all winter. Well, he not only slept all winter, but he slept well into the spring as well. The warm waters finally woke him up, but he had slept much later than he normally does. And so he started swimming to the top. And as he was swimming, he thought to himself, this is taking a lot longer than I thought it did. The pond didn't seem to be this deep when I went down. And so he kept swimming and swimming and swimming, and he finally reached the surface. And when he reached the surface, he looked around and was so shocked. Everything had changed. His grassy bank was under water, the alder trees were cut down, and there was a huge dam in the middle of the pond. He thought to himself, who has done this to my pond? And as he thought this, he heard a whack on the surface of the water. And a strange animal comes swimming up to him. Whack went the animal's tail. Turtle asked the animal, "Who are you? Did you do this to my pond?" Said Beaver. "I am Beaver, and yes, I cut all the trees down to make my dam, and I made the pond deeper so that I could live here. So this is my pond, and you have to leave." "Oh, no," said Turtle. "This is my pond. It is you who has to leave. I was here first. And so, if you're not going to leave, let's fight." And Beaver said, "Well, I'm the best fighter in the world. I have long, sharp teeth. And besides, I'm going to call all my relatives to help me, and they're going to bite your head off." Oh, well, Turtle knew that he could not fight Beaver and win. So he thought of a contest that they could do to decide who would stay and who would go. And he thought maybe an underwater contest. Who could be underwater the longest? And then Beaver said, "Oh, we could do an underwater contest. I could stay under there all day." Well, Turtle knew he would have to think of a different contest. And so he said, "Well, I'm the best swimmer in the world. Let's have a swimming contest. Whoever reaches the other bank first wins and gets to stay at the pond. Whoever loses has to leave." And Beaver said, "That's a great idea. I'm the fastest swimmer in the universe. Let's go." And Turtle said, "Oh, wait just a minute. I shouldn't line up even with you. I should line up a little behind you because I'm such a fast swimmer that I don't want to give you an unfair advantage." So Turtle lined up right next to Beaver's tail, and off they went. Beaver was swimming and swimming, and it was all Turtle could do to keep up with him. Well, Beaver started pulling away from Turtle, so Turtle bit onto Beaver's tail and hung on for dear life. And Beaver could feel that something was pinching his tail, and he swished it back and forth to try to get rid of it, but he was so intent on swimming to the bank and winning that he didn't really do anything about it. So as they got nearer to the bank, Turtle bit down harder on Beaver's tail. And Beaver swished and swished and then lifted his tail up to try to dislodge Turtle. Well, as soon as the tail got to the top of the swing, Turtle let go of the tail and whee, plop, landed on the bank ahead of Beaver. He had won the race. Beaver looked up and was shocked. Turtle had won. And so Beaver had to leave, and he left. And so Turtle found that the pond had even more fish than before because it was deeper, and the alder trees grew back. And so Turtle lived happily ever after, knowing that his pond was the best in the whole world.
This story has an important message. To me, Beaver represents what humanity does to the earth. He changed the pond and greedily told Turtle that it was his pond and that Turtle had to leave. Turtle could be thought of as Mother Nature. He won back his pond and his pond recovered. I believe we can avert these ecological crises, that we are not doomed. Mother Earth's ability to heal is nothing short of miraculous. However, it's going to take a multi-pronged approach. First, I think we should start by changing our pronouns from it to he or she, as Kimmerer suggests. It's more unlikely that you would cut down a tree if you're thinking of her. There must be worldwide agreement on the importance of addressing ecological challenges. Humanity could solve these problems if we all work toward the common goal of healing Mother Earth. So far, the ecological movement has made important inroads thanks to the many civic organizations that exist. However, World Summits have not lived up to expectations due to the lack of commitment on the part of governments to enact the policies recommended by summits, such as the 1992 World Summit. Placing national interests above the common good results in inaction. Some strategies for reducing pollutant gas emissions call for the international sharing of environmental costs so that poor countries are not overly burdened. There is a need for common yet differentiated responsibilities. The countries that have contributed the most to greenhouse gases, which are highly industrialized nations such as the United States, should shoulder most of the responsibility. So agreements between nations are urgently needed. In order to eliminate poverty and reduce global warming, there needs to be an organized international institution who are empowered to impose sanctions. That being said, it needs to start with local individuals and groups. There are cooperatives being developed in places that take advantage of renewable sources of energy. These cooperatives encourage self-sufficiency and even sell surplus energy. Groups such as these and society in general need to convince governments to develop stricter regulations, procedures, and controls. Agreements between neighboring communities are an important starting point toward national and then international collaboration. As individuals, congregations, and organizations, we can take action in each of three ways. Number one, we could shift to a low carbon future. Number two, advance the human rights of frontline communities. And number three, grow the climate justice movement. Unitarian Universalists see ourselves as one thread in a single fabric of all existence. We embrace nature's beauty and are in awe of its power. We have a responsibility to care for our home and stand together with those most affected by pollution, environmental destruction, increasingly severe natural disasters, and other impacts of climate change. The Unitarian Universalist Association has a website where you can get more information on steps you can take, and it's environment@uua.org. The website has many resources covering every aspect of environmental justice. I have faith that humanity will come together for the common good.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Spirit of life, once again, this past week, the violent hatred of white supremacy left a wake of death, this time in the Asian communities around Atlanta. We are shaken to our souls once again, and yet we are not surprised as our nation suffers from the long raging pandemic of white supremacist patriarchy. We grieve and we recommit ourselves to living lives of acceptance, compassion, and kindness. May the shadows of this past week remind us once again to use what privilege we have to work for justice, and may it increase our gratitude for our congregational communities as a cornerstone of our lives. For within our congregations, we find and share belonging, meaning, and friendship. We create and sustain connections of heart and spirit. We pledge to support others as we trust that others will support us when we need companionship and comfort. This morning, we hold these people especially close to our hearts. Adele Taylor, who is having hip surgery, so, as she says, she can hike and dance again. Also Randy Heath and Steve Barnes, Paul Richard and Rhiannon Klein, Becky Skinner and her granddaughter Lyra, Cassandra Hardaby and Connie Welton, as well as all those struggling with dis-ease and illnesses both visible and invisible, all those whose lives have been lost or affected by COVID, all those whose lives have been lost to the evils of white supremacy and patriarchy. May the love of this community inspire us and strengthen us in our own life's journey. May the light of the chalice remind us that we are all part of the sacred fire of life and treasured members of this community. May we never forget that the Spirit of life connects us with a love that holds us all, always. Amen.
Dear source of all life, in this time of apocalypse, there is ecological disaster, the rise of hate crimes against Asian Americans and people of color, the pandemic, and the sometimes brutal effects of white supremacy. Please give us the power of love that we may help heal each other and the earth. Fill our hearts with peace that we may coexist as brothers and sisters in right relation with all living beings. Give us the strength to bring the marginalized, poor, and forgotten into the light of justice. Bring healing to our lives so that we protect the world, not prey on it. Help those who look only for gain at the expense of Mother Earth and the poor. Touch our hearts so that we may know the profound connection we have to every creature and plant. Give us hope and help us persevere in our struggles for justice, love, and peace. May it be so.
Our service may be drawing to a close, but there's always coffee hour. Please pour a cup of your favorite beverage and zoom on in. Join us for coffee at go.uucentralct.org/coffee. That's go.uucentralct.org/coffee. We'll see you in a few minutes.
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the joy of here and die, for the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, linking sense to sound and sight, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful
Now it is time to extinguish our chalice. Our service has come to an end. I leave you with these words from the poem Prevail, an Etymology by Reverend Teresa Soto. No one knows everything, even though some people wisecrack like they do. You could not know before right now what this moment would call for. Knowing, you now move toward greater strength. Knowing this very moment, you teach yourself and your communities what and how we shall be more able, not simply to survive the day, but also to take the future back in your own hard-working hands, our communal resistance and possession. You will prevail if you commit, doing the next thing because it is next, moving toward greater strength, building the skills it takes to heal the aching world. May the flame of our chalice light your way in peace and love. See you next week, beloveds.
Bye.